Okay, that's fine. But what is the storytelling? How have we gone down since 2010? How does cutting the adult program change things, right? So we're looking to locate, analyze, structure, and present this data into useful information for us to be able to view it and for others to be able to view it in a useful manner, something that brings utility. So this will be useful in your internship, highly marketable because we're transferring into a more technological and data-driven economy. So as we go forward, we're going to have a few members all doing this. Liam's going to continue sharing a screen, and Jack is going to guide us in locating our primary data sources and what we'll be using first. So Jack, we're going to go to the next slide, pass it to you, and find two data sources that make sense for us to analyze hand in hand. So this takes some economic knowledge. Looking at the articles like Hussein said that he was doing, saying, man, I wonder how these two things are related, and looking for causality in those. So this will be some really advanced stuff, and then some stuff that that'll come really fast. So Jack?
All right. So, I mean, I guess today we're going to be looking at a time series. And what we want to do is first, you're probably going to want to go to Wall Street Journal and just kind of figure out what topic you want to search, figure out what's going on. But we're going to go straight to Fred and find the two variables that we want to look at. Liam's going to go there. And so we're going to look at a time series of our GDP, our real GDP.
Jack, you want to set up like a little story, our little story we came up with?
Oh yeah, we can. So during the last recession, the largest the market that was impacted the greatest was the housing market. And so we want to see how greatly that was affected during the last recession and the implications of how long it took to recover after the recession.
Yeah, so when you're thinking about, you know, what things you want to compare, what indicators you want to compare, a lot of it is kind of an educated guess and check. It's thinking about what indicators you think would be related. So the first thing we want to look at is we're going to use as kind of like our baseline, which is going to be real GDP. This one right here. So GDP is like, as most of us know, is like the benchmark indicator, right? And so we want to compare our, second indicator, our interesting one that's kind of different, and how it relates to this. And that's going to be really helpful for us to, compare and show and line up the timelines of a recession and with the indicator we want to use secondly.
And so because we're going to be looking at the 2009 recession, I guess something that the market that was impacted the greatest was the housing market. So we're going to look up, I guess housing starts would be a good place, or anything involving the housing market. So I'd just type in housing and see what.
Yeah, and we are strongly encouraging you guys to do this on your own and follow along so that, we can walk through it together and you can get the real experience. But yeah, like Jack said, we want to look at housing. So we really this happens a lot where you just kind of type in one of the words from the thing you're looking for. Like we would just type in housing and see what comes up and go through and see if there's anything interesting in these graphs. And housing starts, which is very self-explanatory. It's just how many people, bought a new home, built a new home. So we're going to click that and we're going to add a new data series.
It's not very useful right now, but we'll go to the format of it and move it to the right axis so it can be compared a little bit more easily.
Everybody with us?
Yeah, Liam, can you slow down a little bit? Jack, also, what's the utility in moving it to the right axis?
Well, because GDP is changing, it's in percent change. It's only going to be small percent change, and
So
the housing starts is
it
going like
percent change from the year before.
what?
It means percent change from the year before.
Yes.
So every year it's showing how much GDP is changing.
Yes.
And then the housing starts will show what for us in this?
The total number of houses either built or bought within that year.
Okay.
Right. So the GDP percent change is a relative statistic that's based on percentage, whereas housing starts is just a cumulative number and a cumulative data point. So we don't want to compare those on the same axis with the same figures, because it's going to look like this, which is that it's like you see the red line isn't really telling us anything here. So what we do is after we've added the second line, we go over to format on the right here, and we go down to the housing starts, and we're going to graph the housing starts on the right y-axis position. And once we do that, boom, it looks really ugly right now because we're super zoomed out. We're going to zoom that in.
Go to 2000 to 2020.
Well, it's also on monthly right now.
Oh yeah, that's why it's so volatile. So
The one thing you're going to run into, which is very important to know, is that a lot of graphs, especially on Fred and popular ones, like housing starts is one that's really well monitored, and so is GDP. It's going to have like daily, monthly, quarterly, annual data. And the more frequent you measure it, so the closer to daily and monthly is going to be super volatile, like you see right here. So every single line adjustment is every month of the year for all these years. So in order to kind of buffer that, we're going to switch this over to quarterly and see if it's a little less volatile, and see that's much better looking for us. Now we can analyze this a little better. And now that it's graphed on the second y-axis, we can actually compare them. And as we zoom in a little closer to 2000, using this bottom slider here, you start to see that there really was a causation here. So
I have a quick question.
Go for it.
To add the second line, the housing starts, don't you just go to the add line, or?
Yes, you just go to edit graph and then add line and just type in housing starts. But then it'll initially it graphs it on the left axis, which is why we had to switch it over to the right.
Oh,
sorry,
it's not coming up on mine. So, okay, I'll just figure it out.
wait, no, Liam. When you go to add line, can you go to add line again?
You can, Liam, remove just remove it and do it again.
Yeah, I'll do that for sure.
So why are we doing privately owned? So if you go to edit graph, like if you go through it again, add line housing starts, if you just type that in, why did you hit new privately owned housing units instead
Because
of
that's
others?
what privately owned is, just a fancy way of saying like if I own it versus Jack owns it, that's privately owned. Like it's not commercial housing, it's consumer housing. It's like individual households, which is why it's important, because this was a housing crisis. As far as it's not like a commercial real estate crisis. It was a individual housing mortgage crisis, and so that's why we have to focus on individuals, and that's why we hit private. So,
Alatif, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Are you able to find that new line? Are you able to click new privately owned?
Yeah.
And you got it?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, and then you hit add data series?
Yeah.
and is it looking like this?
It's not looking like that. I put them both on quarterly, so.
Quarterly change.
Are they both on percent change from a year ago?
Yeah.
See, they're on percent change from a year ago because the first line that we were doing was GDP, which was already on percent change from a year ago on the left axis. So it immediately copies the new line onto that measurement. And we don't want to look at housing starts percent change, because that really won't tell us that much. What we want to look at is, for housing starts, is cumulative data. But in order to show it compared to GDP's percent change, that's why we have to move it onto another axis. And so to do that, we go to Format, we come down to Housing Starts, and we just click right on this y-axis position, and boom.
Liam, I'm confused here. You said something a second ago about housing starts. You don't want it something. Let me see how yours looks compared to mine. Yeah, so yours is looking different. What can you go to edit lines real quick? And edit line 2. So you have quarterly data for both?
Yes.
That's still percent change from a year ago, though.
Percent change from, you want it percent change from 1 year ago?
No, we want that.
You want thousands of units?
Yeah, so I changed this over to thousands of units so that we can look at the total numbers, because this is a data point that, like, if you look at GDP by strictly the amount, it's just going to be like a solid line. But this is a number that fluctuates enough that we can look at it in quantity as opposed to percent change. And now that we've done that,
My format is looking different from your format. Can you click on your format?
sure.
Mine doesn't show all of that. It just says graph type, stacking, and then recession shading.
So it doesn't have anything
All of that
last year.
details. Let me enlarge in my browser and see if it changed. Okay, now it's showing. I think it was because I was minimizing the screen.
Sweet.
All right, thank you. I got it.
And now you see, did you do the y-axis now?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. All right. Now that we have our units where we want them, now we can really see what we were looking for, which is this right in the middle here. You see, as the housing market was in a huge boom after the brief 2002 recession, it was in a huge, huge, huge boom. And then as the mortgages started to fail, it starts to go down significantly, and boom, now we're in the recession. And you can see as the GDP percent change is really low over here, this is pretty like large. I don't know why this is so big over here, but as it dips down into the teens of percent change, you can see the housing really start to sink, and you can see a real causation here. And you see that the GDP percent change doesn't start to go down until the housing market is well into their dip. And that is really evident of a causation and a relationship between these two indicators. So at this stage in your graph making and evidence finding process, now that we've got the format, we've realized that we found a causation here, and we found a relationship, and we want to use this. So what we're going to do next, if you all have Excel on your computer, which I hope you do, it's free from the school provides it, which is very nice of them, especially for econ majors. You just want to go over here to download, and then hit Excel data. Now, a big thing that people like to do before we move on is, especially I've seen it a lot in Robert's classes, is that if they're doing a presentation or they're doing a paper or something, they just like to take a screenshot of this and just throw it in their paper. And I'm telling you, if you put that in a presentation, it doesn't matter what else you say in that presentation, Robert will only talk about that you did that. And that's all you'll hear about. So that's why we have to take this next step.
What I want to point out is on Fred, they are a secondary source. So the primary source is located at the bottom of their graph. So you see sources BEA, the census, and housing and urban development. So that's where you can literally go on their websites and download the data if you can find it. But the good thing is that Fred does have their own Excel tables to choose from. But that's where Fred is getting their data.
Yeah, and we'll get to that. We'll circle back to that when we go to list our source later. But you have to remember that the source isn't Fred. Fred is kind of just keep putting it all together for us.
Right. So Liam, what can you check in on everybody and then say what we're going to be pass it to Brooks for what we're going to be doing in Excel?
Yeah. How are we looking? Do we have the Excel downloaded? Hussein, how's it coming, man? Good. All right. I'm going to open this up and hand it over to Brooks.
Okay, so this is where things can get a little bit complicated after you've downloaded the data. Now you see the thing with Fred is you have literally, that's quarterly. Okay, so it's a little bit better when it's quarterly. I was dealing with data. I was dealing with oil prices. It was a daily price. I had an oil price for every day for 20 years. That was pretty bad. But now this is a lot better. My thing that I kind of go through is I kind of guess and check and see what the graph spits out. There's really like no surefire way to do this. So Liam, if you want to, you could do like from 2000 to 2021 and we can highlight both of them, or excuse me, you could do till 1996, but you have to make sure that the labels are what you're looking at. So you see housing starts, Liam can rename that and actually put in housing starts instead of house T.
Yeah.
And then,
so like the algorithm of Fred puts in like their whatever like weird technical label that they gave the information, which is why you see this ridiculous title right here, which is for GDP percent change.
yeah.
You can easily change that. Once you get to this point, you're not like altering any of the data by doing this. You're not messing anything up. You can simply just type in GDP percent change. And this one will be housing starts. I can spell.
Yeah, and so like I was kind of saying before, if you wanted to change it, let's say you only wanted to look at 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, you can just cut the data and then paste it under 2 new columns and then write your own headings. So what I would do, if whatever Liam wants to do, we could go from 1996 to 2021.
Let's say we'll go from
headings,
2000. How about that?
2000.
If you wanted to look at from 2000, like say you already gotten to this point and you don't want to re-download the data, the quick trick that I do is just to highlight these.
Yeah, and you can take them out.
And you can click this, double click them, press hide. Boom, and now you've consolidated all your data down. One thing that you can take out, it'll really help your formatting, is that right here where it tells you the frequency and observation date, you can just, what I usually do is just take those away because it's just gonna mess up your formatting later and put a text in the box in your graph that you don't really need. Is everybody with us to this point?
No, Liam, can you go over the hide again? And
yeah.
Sorry for interrupted. Okay, you highlighted that data.
Yeah,
and then
if I wanted to hide data, you just you don't want to click on the individual boxes because that'll only take away like those specific boxes. If you want to take away an entire row, you can highlight entire rows easily by over here on the left by these numbers, and you can click and drag. And then you can do the keyboard shortcut, which is Control 9, or you can just double click and press hide, and they'll disappear.
Perfect.
And then when I go to highlight this to make my graph, it won't touch those hidden data sets.
Perfect.
So now we're ready to make our graph. And we've
also
got
on the hide. Some of this is also preference. If you're like me and like the hide thing would kind of confuse you, because I like to see everything, what I'm comparing it against, you could always just cut it out and then paste it to another sheet, if you will. A
Yeah, I
lot
mean,
of
you
this
could
is
even
kind of
paste it.
reference with
You
what
could even paste it right here, starting at 2000, and have it from 1996 here and 2000 starting here.
Yeah, bro,
Just
that's
a little fancy.
what I usually do.
Yeah.
Excel, you'll find, is like everyone has their own methods.
Yeah.
So there's no real like one way to do it. We're just trying to give our overall guidance here. And you'll find that with graph making as well.
You can also like copy your data, create a new sheet, and then work on it there as well.
You
Yeah,
can also
absolutely.
do that. A lot of options. Excel put a lot of options in. All right, so now that we're at this point, I hid the stuff that was up here, but I just want to reiterate that you don't need anything that's up here for your graph. You only need what's right here and what's right above the data. So it's good to put a blank space in here because it makes the transition into a graph a lot more seamless. So we're going to highlight this, all of our data we want, all the way down to 2020. We're going to press insert. And you can go to a recommended.
Sheets. I haven't downloaded it. I changed my computer and I haven't downloaded the Excel yet.
Okay, so you're doing it on Google Sheets?
I'm saying, can we do it on Sheets? Because I know it doesn't have some of the functions on Sheets, but that's why I didn't try. But has anyone tried it before?
Pretty sure you can do it.
I think you can, but it's just a different.
You can, but I'm wondering when you download it from Fred.
It
Yeah,
would go, yeah.
I usually have to like copy the data
Yeah.
from somewhere into Sheets. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, having Excel makes it a lot easier because you can just click download right into an Excel sheet. It'll create a new sheet for you and lay out the data exactly how you want it.
Yeah.
Fred in one click. You can definitely do it all with Sheets. It's just a little more tedious because they don't have that built-in function as they do with Excel.
And then that
I
way
believe it also has a lot less graph modification options.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just observe for today then.
All right, yeah, that works. And you can write down whatever we say and take notes if that helps as well.
Are you able to record the meeting?
Yeah, I am recording.
Okay, cool. Just I'll if you send the recording, that will be helpful later.
Absolutely, we'll send that out to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So now that we've got this highlighted, we're going to go up here to recommend. Usually you can look at recommended charts and see what they say. Usually you can see some funny charts on here to get a little laugh, like this one right here is a scatter plot. Because Excel doesn't really know what kind of data it's looking at. It just knows the numbers. But we know what we want to use, which is a 2D double line graph. And we're going to click that.
Hey, Liam.
Yes.
I'm running into an issue here, and it is that I don't have the same decimal places as you. So here it says GDP percent change, and then I have 1.0 at the top instead of negative 60.5. Did I download the wrong data? Let me see. I have GDP percent change quarterly seasonally adjusted. Is that the same as you?
Is it real GDP?
No, it's just GDP. Liam, can you scroll up a little bit? To your definition, real. You have real. Oh, okay, so you have real, and I just have GDP. So that's the difference. But I have to make sure. So I'm gonna have to re-download now. Does everybody else have real GDP? And your graph is looking like what Liam has here? No problems?
Pretty much, yeah.
Nate, it looks like that?
Pretty much.
Okay, what's different?
My graph is kind of narrow and it's like wide, I think.
Yeah, you can extend your graph out to whatever size is comfortable. I usually try to think of it like I'm putting it on like a Google slide or like a presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Think about, or like on a research paper, like formatting it, a little more of a rectangle. The original size could be a little messed up, and especially when you're looking at a data series, you want to format it specifically for your data series. And a lot of times, which is, you cheat a little bit to kind of show what you want to show. And so if you have like a specific thing you're looking to show, you extend it so that it looks a little more exaggerated. Maybe it looks like you can actually extend it out to make it look like a real drop. Like if you were looking at the COVID pandemic, you maybe want to make this a little longer so it makes this drop look pretty significant. But yeah, so now this is the purely Excel generated graph. I haven't made any adjustments yet.
Yeah, Liam, so mine doesn't look like that. So I just had a quick question. I guess maybe me and Ben had a similar issue. But my percent change, like GDP percent change values are much smaller. So I am not getting that same line for GDP.
Is this exactly the same right here?
Let me check.
I had the same issue, Gio, and I had to change it from GDP data from the preceding period to from a year ago, which is what Liam has. And then I got Liam's numbers.
Okay, that's probably what I did wrong. Thank you.
So it's percent change from a year ago?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you'll find that to be pretty standard as the one that you want to use, or especially just for GDP at least. So when you take it from Fred, it doesn't know that it had a secondary axis on Fred. So it's going to give you this just like Fred originally did, which is on the same axis. So these are both on this left axis. And actually, I think these are both on the percent change, right? So it thinks that these numbers are percent change numbers, but we obviously have two very different values types here. So what we're going to do is we're going to click this data series right here, the GDP one, and we're going to double click it and go down to format data series. And you can see right here, it gives you the option, and we're going to graph that on the secondary axis. And now it's looking a lot more like we wanted it to look, starting to take more shape. So now we've got on the left, we've got our total housing starts in thousands, and on the right, we've got our GDP percent change quarterly from a year ago.
And our goal is to show what in the graph again?
Our goal was to show how when GDP started to go down in 2008, 2009, its relationship with this big decrease in housing starts.
Gotcha. Why this graph? I know this graph is good for it, but how did you know to choose this graph instead of a scatter plot?
Because this is a time series graph, and so it shows how each of these indicators has changed over whatever period of time we want to look at. So we chose from 2000. And so we can see how, like, during this period from 2001 to 2006, there was a huge housing boom, and we can see that. Then after 2006 to 2010, there was a huge decline, and we can see that.
Oh, okay, got it. Thank you.
So the line graph really helps showing relationships and patterns.
Yeah, Liam, as an example, can you choose a different type of graph to overlay just to show what difference it'll look like? If you feel like we have the time for that, if you'd like to do something different, then we can.
Yeah, I mean, it's 11:57 right now.
Okay, do you want to get into the intricacies of making sure this looks how we want it? Clean points? Okay.
Yeah, so to start off, some things that you want to take care of and make sure that go together well in the graph is you want to have a consistent font all the way through. And now this does have a consistent font. It does the like Apple generated one, which is Calibri body. And now you can use that font. You can use whatever font that you think looks the best. The font that I like to use is Arial. So what I'm going to do is select the entire graph. Yours might be Times New Roman. It can be whatever you want it to be. But the one thing you have to remember is that it has to be consistent. It has to, all the fonts, because you have a lot of numbers on this. Even though we're looking at the lines, there's still a good amount of numbers on here, and you got to make sure that they're all the same font. So I'm going to click the whole graph. You can select the whole thing. I'm going to come over here. It knows that I like to use Arial, and I'm going to click Arial, and boom, it's all changed. Now, the next thing we're going to change on here is this mess down here on the x-axis. This is how it wants to put it based on these numbers over here. And because this is such kind of a long value, it puts them like this so they can fit them all. But it's going to make the person have to go like this to read them. And they're going to have to try to find out where the tick marks line up. So you got to make sure your x-axis is readable so they can follow the pattern that you want them to follow. So what we're going to do is come over here to these 3 bars over here after you've clicked on it. And this is where you can edit your axis. Okay, we're good with the axis with these down here. You want to have your axis position be on the tick marks so that you can actually line up a date. What it wants to do for some reason is put the dates between the tick marks. So it's not exactly lined up, but I like to put them on it so you can actually see, like, at this point, right up to the graph, that's where it was. Next, we're going to go down to number. Now, this is where you're going to change how this looks and how this is formatted. If you go to category, it's on custom right now, and every single one of these has a code, and you can find a code, but that's really tedious to try to find the right code because the codes are going to be like, some of them are like F4 % GH7, and that's very annoying. But what you can do instead is just go up to category, and these are dates. So we're going to click date, and you can see it's already looking better. And the date that I like to use is, just to keep it really, really simple, is this one right here, the one that says Mar-12. And so we can use that one right here. The only problem is that this is quarterly data, so that works better for annual data. So if you want to use one of these instead, like maybe this one that shows the entire date, like that. Again, you just got to find one that feels good to you and that you think illustrates your point the best. But yeah, we can use this one, and it'll show us, because it's not going to show every single quarter down here like it will up here. It's just going to show us, you know, January, July, and you got to kind of find it, how it lines up on the graph. Now, we're still dealing with the problem, even though this looks a lot better, we're still dealing with the problem of turning your head to have to read it and lining it up. So the way that we can change that, so we come over to here to alignment, which is this box looking thing. It gives you an angle you can type in, and that's the angle of each one of these lines and how it looks. And you can make that whatever you want. You can make it, you know, 45 degrees, and it'll make it look like that. You can make it, one that we like to use a lot, especially when you have a good amount of numbers like this, is we have to use -75. Make it look like that. I would say using a negative is probably a better idea, like -45, so that you keep with that left to right reading style.
That's good.
-45 is a good one, another one I would recommend. Is everybody with us on there?
Yep.
Sweet. And now we're starting to, this is starting to take shape now. We're starting to actually be able to read what's going on here. So I'm gonna click out of that axis. Now this axis is pretty much good to go. Another thing you can do, this is a preference thing also, is the tick marks. Now these tick marks are going down towards the dates. What I like to do is to have them go outside and inside. And so that's how you can click this major type. You don't really want to deal with the minor type because that's going to be off of your, you know, timeline. But if you want, you can do major type. I like to do cross. So you can see here, it goes up and into the axis just makes it a little easier to read going up. And then a big thing you want to do is that the gray in the graphs, because these colors are so bright, it's going to make them kind of hard to read initially on first glance. So what you want to do is go to this bucket right here for the colors and make this line right here. You see it's on a really light gray. So you want to make this axis line black, and it's going to make all these tick marks black. And now our graph, you can really tell these tick marks better. And once you put a black line on here, it's just going to be, as far as, you know, formatting and, you know, making it look good to the eye, it's going to help you to make these font colors black as well. And that's another thing, is that is a preference thing also, but the one thing that it has to be is consistent. Not only do you have to have a consistent font around the whole graph, but you have to have consistent font colors. And black is the most easily readable one. So I'm going to click this entire graph, click on the whole thing, come up here, press black, and now they're all in black font.
Hey Liam, sorry to interrupt. I have to go. I have a meeting. So if you guys can send me a recorded video of this, that'd be great.
For sure, man. I appreciate you coming.
All right. See y'all next Friday.
Yeah.
All right, we're getting towards the end here.
Wait, can you show again how you made all of the font black?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that I realized in trial and error with Excel, as far as I would click on every single one. But what you can do is literally, like, so if I'm clicked somewhere else, like I'm clicked on this axis or something, if you just click on the entire graph, like up in a blank corner up here somewhere, and then go up to home up here, and just click black font, it'll make everything in the graph black, which will really help.
Thank you, yep.
All right, finishing touches here, chart title. What you want to make your chart title is you really just want to stick with the names of what you're comparing here. So you have GDP and you have housing starts. And these are both in the US, but since your paper is most likely only going to be about the US or something when you're comparing these two, you just want to say GDP percent change. And what we like to do usually is you put like versus housing starts, and then you throw a comma in and put the date range of your graph. So 2000 to 2020. And you want to make it a little bigger than this. You know, these font sizes are going to change based on how big your graph is, but I usually like to do 18 just to have it stand out. Lower it just a little bit. All right. The next thing that you need to have are axes titles. And there's 3 axes in this graph, which you're not always going to have, but what you're going to want to do is click the whole chart, come up here and press chart design at the top, and add a chart element, and then axes titles. We're going to start with the primary vertical, and primary vertical is going to be your left one here, and your left values are housing starts. So you got to come up here and look to your units and see what your units are, and it's thousands of units. So you're going to want to type that in, thousands of units. Now you don't want the eye of the person reading the graph to be taken away from the numbers. You just want this here in case they're, you know, really want to know. So what we're going to do with this color over here is we're going to make this text gray. Since it's kind of a secondary thing, it's not like too important, we're going to make that gray, kind of bring it into the background a little bit.
Hey, Liam.
Yes, sir.
I'm getting a little bit confused with the different axes, and as I'm reading this, which way does the GDP start versus which way does the housing starts start? You know what I mean? Like how should we label each side? Or should we even make a label for that?
I think that once I put in percent change over here, as far as the axes label, that'll kind of give an indicator.
Okay.
Because you know that this one's called percent change. So you can kind of line it up with that. Now we've done that one. Go back to chart design, add chart element, axes title, secondary vertical. It's going to drop this in over here for us. And we're going to make this percent change from year ago. Try to center it as best you can. And don't center it based on the numbers, center it based on its location in the rectangle, because you can see that 0 is the center of the numbers, but it's kind of higher up because it goes deeper into the negatives than it does to the positives. So we're going to make that the same color gray that you have over here, which should be still on your home thing. Now we've got those done. So this is a big thing that is included in the preferences, but this is something that I am firm on in my graph making, and that Robert introduced to me, as well as Enrique when he was teaching me how to do this. But what I like to do is I like to get rid of the legend down here, because what you want to do is have the focus of your person reading always being on the lines on the graph. And you don't want them having to look at the lines and then look back at the legend and back at the lines and back at the legend. And you can just, what I like to do is I like to get rid of the legend. Just, okay, well, there's my whole graph. Make sure you're clicking directly on this, and you can double click that, press delete, and it just goes away pretty seamlessly. And everything else will adjust when you do that. What I like to do is insert a text box, and I'll draw one. You got to find a good location based on the lines of your graph. So it's going to be different for every graph based on where there's going to be big fluctuations. And I know that there's going to be, we'll get into this in a second, there's going to be a recession bar right here. So I don't want to put it there. So what I'm going to do is put it right on this point right here. And I'm going to type in GDP. Because they know it's percent change up here, I can just type in GDP, keep it simple. And what you want to do is make this color the same color as your line. And so while you might want to try to, some people try to just guess the blue based on like the ones provided. If you go into the colors, hit this little drop down arrow and hit more colors, you can use the dropper and you can go directly onto the line and get the exact color blue that is in your line. Make sure that these fonts are the same as the fonts you have all the way around. That's a big mistake because the text box will automatically put it back at Calibri. So put it back to Arial. And we're going to boost that font up so you can see it. Bring that down just like that. Bam. Now you have a clear label and you didn't even need a legend. So they can just keep looking at the numbers that you have up here. And we're going to do the same thing. I usually like to just copy this so that the font stays the same. I copy the text box, paste it, bring it down. A good location for this one is down here because it's by itself. You come in here, housing starts, get a little wider. And what you want to do, like with everything else, come into this color, go back to this dropper, line it up with the line right here so you get the exact color orange. Okay, now you've got another label. Bang.
Boom.
You didn't even need a legend.
Beautiful evidence.
You are a legend.
Lastly, this is something that people can kind of forget about. And it's not going to be for every country, which I'm realizing in my research for Robert's class right now. But because this is specifically United States data and we're looking at a recession specifically, we have to put in a bar for recessions. That's going to indicate when the recession started and when it ended. Fred does it automatically on mayors, but it doesn't translate over. So what you want to do, this is a little bit tedious, but you want to come in and insert a shape. And I just use the square. And it'll let you draw the square. So the recession started in late 2007, which is right about, line it up, right about here-ish. And we're going to make this rectangle go down a little bit into 2009 is when our recession was. Release it. Now it's going to be this big blue thing in the way of everything. So that's when we come over here to the formatting. You want to give it no line, so there's no outline on it. And then when you come up to the fill, your fill is going to be solid, but it's not going to be blue. You're going to make it gray, whatever color gray that you want. Doesn't really matter that much. I'm going to use this one. And what you want to do to make it a transparent bar is raise this transparency as high as you see fit. Looks like around 65% is good for this one. And you can click out and just see how it looks. Boom. So now we have this bar right here indicating our recession, when it was, how long it was. And especially because we're focusing on the 2008, 2009 recession, that's why you want to make sure that you have this one right here. Yes, Ben, you raised a hand.
Yeah, the one thing I want to mention is what Liam just did is finally getting at why we're comparing housing starts and GDP if we're to show this to someone who doesn't know econ. Look at when housing starts started to go down, and it essentially predicts the recession, right? So that's what we're trying to see here, is using housing starts, which economists do, to predict the recessionary flow or what happens with this data. So that's why we use these two indicators to show you, hey, we could predict. And then you get into 2020 and say, holy crap, you can't really predict that because it's not financial wealth. We can get into that. That's where the utility in this graph comes from.
Exactly. So like Ben said, we wanted to focus on this one, but once you have one recession bar on here, you want to point out the other recessions in the time period that you're looking at. But once you've made one bar, you can just copy paste it. So we're going to copy and we're going to paste right away. And the other recessions on here are a brief one during 2001 and 2002 after 9/11. And we're going to put that right here. It's a little shorter in time, so we're going to make it a little skinnier. There's one, and then obviously, as we all know way too well, is the current recession happening. And we're going to start it right around after January right there, and we're going to shrink it to the end of the graph. And ladies and gentlemen, I give you your beautiful evidence.
There it is. Now, there's tiny little room for improvement that we could do all over this, but what Liam's done is laid a really strong foundation for us to go forward. Like, you don't have to have floating point numbers on the right axis. You can do different things with your labeling, different colors, but this is super fundamental to our learning and to highlight and make use of facts. Because look, this is a great analysis. Look on the left. I can't tell anything from these numbers right here. It would take me years. Putting this into a graph, it makes it so easy for me to say, holy crap, look at housing starts. So this is the utility. Liam, if you could stop sharing and don't stop the recording yet. We'll just have a reflection on this and then get going. We're about 16 minutes over, but this is awesome.
Can I just ask, do your graphs that you guys made, did they look like this, at close to it at least? And I hope Husnain's was looking like this too, because he wasn't raising problems. But yeah, this is the good foundation. You can obviously, like Ben said, change these colors, do whatever you want.
How did you learn to do that, from class or just like outside of class?
I learned to do it outside of class, but I really needed it. I really needed it since for class, but I learned to do it when I was doing the Fed Challenge my sophomore year, because we had to make a bunch of graphs, and I had to do graphs that were just for what I was focusing on. And I needed to, and, you know, obviously my teammates who were seniors, you know, they had to focus on their own stuff. So they needed to get me caught up. And so they sat me down and walked me through how to make the Excel graphs. And so it was through that, like like month-long period of just doing it over and over and over again and going back and changing it and going back and changing it, doing another one, that I just learned the repetitive formatting process.
Oh, okay, that was very helpful. Thank you.
Of course.
Where are you getting those?
All right.
I'm going to stop recording. Wait, let me get a screenshot of that first. There we go.